Welcome to our exploration of faith, love, and discipleship. Today, we delve into the life of Peter, a man who, despite his doubts and denials, was called to follow Jesus. We'll journey through his experiences, his struggles, and his ultimate restoration. This is a story of every one of us, a story of being human, of faltering, and of finding our way back.
And Jesus walked by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Let's pray. Father, as we come to you this morning, Lord, I'm just asking that your Spirit will come down on this place this morning and just pour over all the hearts in here, Lord. And Lord, that I'd just be a conduit for you and that your Spirit would just work through me and speak to all the hearts that are here and that your message will prevail. Thank you, Father, for everything you've done in our lives. Amen. So this morning I wanted to talk about discipleship, and I wanted to kind of look at one disciple in particular for this sermon, and we're going to be kind of looking at Simon Peter this morning. In this passage here, one of the main things that sets out to me is Jesus came, he was walking along the shore there, and he saw Peter there, and he said, "Follow me. Follow me. I will make you fishers of men." For those who are called to fish, that don't fish, it can be very detrimental. They usually will turn their energy towards those who are saved, and then they become judgmental and conflicting of those that are saved. So they bring it into the church and it can be disastrous. But those who are called to fish, that actually fish, can really make a big change in the world for God. Let's go to Matthew 10, chapter 1, or verse 1. When he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits, to cast them out, and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. So here he had called Peter and the rest of his disciples, and this is when he's asking them to go out and preach. And he's given the power to them to go do that. So I've been through this for the last several months, really. I've been going through some spiritual warfare. And Satan has been telling me, "You're not good enough. You're not good enough to get up and stand in front of these good people. You don't have enough wisdom. You're not smart enough. You can't do this." And I realized he may be right, but I'll tell you one thing right now. Through God's Spirit working through me, I will have the wisdom. I am good enough. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and so can you. We just have to follow God and be obedient to God. And by looking in His Word, He will work through you. And that's one realization that I've had. We're going to turn to Matthew chapter 14, 22. So here we see that Jesus had just fed the 5,000. And so all of his disciples there, they saw this miraculous feeding of he took the 2 fish and the 5 loaves and he spread it out. So they're watching this miracle. And then immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when the evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "Is it a ghost?" And they cried out for fear. So they just watched Jesus feed the 5,000. They've been walking with Jesus this time, and they see these miracles that Jesus performed, and their first thought is there's a ghost. There's a ghost coming at us in this water. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." And so we're looking at Peter here, and Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So could you imagine doing that? Like you're following this man. You think there's a ghost. There's somebody walking towards you on the water. I mean, put yourself in his shoes. And then Peter, how boisterous he is, he's like, "Well, command me to come to you. If it is you, just command me to come to you." So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. So here he's called Peter to follow him. Peter's been walking with him, seeing these miracles firsthand. I mean, firsthand. This is something that I would love to have followed and walked beside Jesus, to see firsthand what he's doing and his miracles. But here he still had doubt. He still doubted and started to sink. And Jesus said, "Oh, ye of little faith." This man that has just seen him feed the 5,000. And he still had doubt. And still didn't have the faith. We're going to turn to chapter 16. Read 13 through 20. When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I am? Who do they say that I, the Son of Man, am?" So they said, "Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." So we see here Peter has recognized at this point, he's recognized who he is following, the Son of God, that he's following him. And so he has just told, and Jesus said through flesh and blood, you didn't have to go through seeing the flesh and blood, which it's kind of a prediction at this point that God or Jesus knows of what is to come, because we haven't come to the crucifixion just yet. So he knows what's to come, but he's saying, Peter, you do have that faith. You do have that faith that he was saying, "Oh, ye a little faith," earlier. We're going to turn to chapter 26. And we're turning a lot. We're just kind of flowing the life of Peter in his discipleship. We're going to go to verse 31. So here we see that Peter's with Jesus. They're at the Lord's Supper right now. So we're getting closer to the crucifixion. And then Jesus said to them, "All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered." This kind of makes sense to me because of my farming background. Being out there in the cattle, lightning strikes, your cattle, they disperse. They go all different directions. And then it's up to you to kind of get them back together. I've seen it hit the fence, or cows take out fences because of a lightning strike. So this way he said, "I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered." So he's talking about himself being the shepherd. He'll be struck, and the disciples are not going to know what to do. They're going to be scattered. So it's another prediction. But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter answered to him and said, Even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble." Jesus said to him, "Assuredly, I say to you that this night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you." So look at Peter's faith right now. I once asked my dad many years ago, "Dad, how do you know when you're ready to be married? Like, how do you know when you're ready to choose somebody to be your bride?" And my dad's wisdom to me was, well, son, would you give your life so that they could have theirs? He said, that's when you know that you love that person enough to marry him. Which is advice that I've passed on to other people, because I thought that was really good advice. And when I chose my bride, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that if there was a choice, I would give my life so that hers could go on. So that's the kind of love that you're seeing here that Peter's given Jesus. Go on down to, let's see. Let's go to John 18:10. Actually, let's go back to Matthew 26, verses 40 through 44. I skipped ahead. I'm trying to remember how my sermon went when I was 2, but it's been a few years ago. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. So this is when Jesus had went from the Lord's Supper, and he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he is praying to God at this point. So he's there, and he says then he came into the disciples and found them sleeping. And said, Peter, what, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again, a second time, he went away and praying, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, and their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. So, the sorrow, Jesus' sorrow at this point. He's in the woods, in the wilderness, and he's just crying. He's crying. If your best friend or your bride or your husband is crying, are you going to fall asleep? You know, the person you love that much. The only thing that comes close to this in my mind, it was this last year when we lost our baby. And in the middle of the night, my bride would be in there in bed, and she'd be just in tears, just of sorrow and grief. There's no way I could fall asleep. I just had to be there, and I didn't have no words. I just had to be there, hold her, and just be there for her. Let her cry on my shoulder. But here you see that Peter, he's shown this kind of love to Jesus, but here he's falling asleep on his best friend, which is a deep remorse, deep grief over what is to come. And he's fallen asleep 3 times, not just once, 3 times. Now let's turn to John 18:10. Then Simon Peter, this is when they showed up. So this is where we're at. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. And then we can see in Luke 22, chapter 51, you don't have to turn there. This is where Jesus, even though Peter has fallen asleep on him, and when he's asked Peter to just be there for him, just to be there and watch. And Peter gets mad and he jumps up and he's going to protect. He's going to protect, because he said he's going to die for Jesus. And so, or he'll die with him. So he strikes the ear of the high priest's servant. Now that in those days, the high priest's servant is of high stature, So Jesus knows. He knows that because of Peter's actions, that this is going to put Peter to death. They'll put Peter to death because of their laws. So here, Jesus in Luke, it shows in Luke chapter 22, verse 51, it shows that Jesus reached up and he heals his ear. So Jesus is still looking after Peter. He's still looking after him, even though he wouldn't stay awake for him during this time of grief. He still had the love for him that he healed, because he didn't want Peter to have to deal with the repercussions of his quick-tempered reaction. So he's still taking care of him. We're going to go back to chapter 26 and go to verses 69. After Jesus had healed their ears, the high priest's servant ear, the disciples that were there, which was Peter, James, and John, took off and ran. They ran and left Jesus there with the multitude of soldiers. Now, a multitude ranges, in those times, a multitude ranged from 5,000 to, or I think it was 3,000 to 10,000 is what I was researching. So that's a lot of soldiers for one man. For one man, but it was the Son of Jesus, Son of God. But for them not believing, they sent a lot of people to capture one man that they probably never sent to capture anybody else. But his disciples, at that point, they ran. They left him. They abandoned him. Now Peter sat outside of the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him, saying, "You also were with Jesus of Galilee." But he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you are saying." And when he had gone out to the gateway, and another girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This fellow," Peter, also was with Jesus of Nazareth. But again, he denied with an oath, "I do not know this man. I do not know the man." And a little later, those who stood and came up and said to Peter, "Surely you are one of them, for your speech betrays you." Then he began to curse and swear, saying, "I do not know the man." Immediately the rooster crowed, and Peter remembered the word of Jesus, who had said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." So he went out and he wept bitterly. How many times have we denied Christ? How many times have we, and we may have even done it just like Peter. We didn't even realize we were doing it. But in our heart, we made a decision out at the grocery store. We got mad. God told us, "You need to go talk to that person." We're standing in line, and God's saying, and He's pulling on your heart, and He's tugging on you, and saying, "You need to go talk to that person." And how many times did we deny Him, and we didn't go do it? A big thing that I come into realization here a few months ago isn't Peter me? Isn't he you? This is a man that God called to follow Him. He's calling us to follow Him. We are the disciples. God has called us to follow Him. Now, our gifts and what He's calling us to do may look a little different. You don't have to come up here and preach from the pulpit. But every single one of us, if you are a child of God, you are called. Aren't you Peter? Aren't we all Peter? We're all sinners. We're all sinners, saved by the grace of God. But God has called us to follow. Let's turn to John 21, verses 15 through 19. We see here, this is after Jesus was crucified. And He rose in 3 days. And He told him he'd meet him in Galilee. So Jesus has returned, and he's met with His disciples. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord. You know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord. You know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were young, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." Follow me. That's what he said to him at the beginning. Follow me. Even though Peter followed him, he still he had doubt. He still lost his faith. But here, Jesus restored Peter, even though he had denied him 3 times before the cross. This is our lives. This is us. He wants us to go disciple for him. And that's what he's called us to do. It is to be his disciples. Everyone in here, think of your daily lives. And where can you disciple more? What is it that's holding you back? What's your price? Like what is it? There's something that just you're not fully surrendered that's holding you back from being his disciple. I'm not accusing you. Even in my life, there's times that I let me get in the way. And I just realize that I've got to get out of the way and let the Lord work. Aaron, if you want to go ahead and play that. I want to have an altar call. If everybody would stand.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through Peter's life. His story is a testament to the power of faith and the grace of restoration. It's a reminder that even in our doubts and denials, we are called to follow, to learn, and to grow. Remember, we are all Peter. We are all disciples in our own way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing in your faith.